The cage door hung open, absurdly, innocently, like a forgotten question. Inside, the worn fleece blanket lay smooth, untouched. But Chester, the big ginger Tom who'd watched the world with ancient, sad eyes for 7 long months, was gone. And on the floor, precisely centered on the cold concrete, lay a single sheet of folded paper, weighted down by his favorite chipped blue mouse toy. Sarah's breath hitched, a sharp, painful sound in the pre-dawn silence of the Willow Creek shelter. Her fingers, numb with disbelief, trembled as she reached down. The paper was cheap notebook paper, the kind kids used. Unfolding it, her heart hammered against her ribs. The handwriting was impossibly neat, looping, almost elegant, but the message stopped her world. Gone to find the one who needs me more. Don't worry, the rain comes, and the little one by the tracks is afraid. Chester. Sarah's knees buckled. She leaned heavily against the cold metal bars, the paper crinkling in her fist. Chester? Writing? Impossible. Ridiculous. Yet, the blue mouse. Only Chester ever touched that battered toy, carrying it gently in his mouth during his rare melancholic explorations of his cage. 7 months. 7 months of potential adopters passing his kennel, their eyes sliding away from his quiet dignity, his missing ear tip, the slight limp from an old injury. Too old, they'd murmur. Too quiet. Sarah had fought for him, highlighting his gentle purr, the way he'd press his head against the bars for a scratch. But the world wanted kittens, not battle-scarred veterans with haunted eyes. And now he was gone. Vanished. Leaving a letter. The shock was a physical blow, cold and nauseating. Sarah scanned the empty cage again, desperately searching for a hidden latch, a dropped key, anything logical. Nothing. The security cameras, she'd check them immediately. But the words burned in her mind. The little one by the tracks is afraid. The tracks? The abandoned railway line snaking through the woods on the town's edge? And the rain. She glanced out the high window. The sky, moments ago a pale, pre-dawn gray, was bruising rapidly, thick, ominous clouds rolling in. A low rumble of thunder vibrated through the floor. Her blood ran cold. Chester hated storms, hated them with a trembling, hiding terror that made him burrow deep into his blankets. The idea of him out there alone in this. Forcing her legs to move, Sarah sprinted to the tiny office, fumbling with the keys. The ancient monitor flickered to life. She rewound the feed from Chester's kennel block, her finger jittering on the mouse. The grainy black and white image showed the usual quiet corridor. Chester was visible, a large, indistinct shape curled on his blanket. Then, at 4:37 a.m., a flicker. Not near Chester's cage, but near the heavy fire exit door at the far end of the block. The camera angle was poor, obscured by stacked crates. Sarah leaned closer, squinting. Was that movement? A shadow detaching itself from deeper shadows. Near the door, it was impossible to tell. Just a brief, indistinct blur. Then nothing. The door remained closed. Chester remained a still lump in his cage. Until, she fast-forwarded. At 5:02 a.m., the image of Chester in his cage simply dissolved, like smoke. One frame he was there, the next, the blanket lay flat. The cage door was still closed. She rewound, played it frame by frame. Nothing. No hand opening the latch, no cat squeezing through impossibly narrow bars. Just Chester. Then empty space. And a minute later, the folded paper seemed to appear on the cage floor, the blue mouse settling onto it as if placed by an invisible hand. Sarah recoiled, a chill deeper than the morning air crawling up her spine. This wasn't just an escape. This was unnatural, impossible. The handwritten note felt suddenly heavier, colder in her pocket. Logic warred with the impossible evidence before her eyes. The storm outside intensified, rain lashing against the windows like frantic fingers. The little one by the tracks is afraid. The words echoed, cutting through her rising panic. Could it be true? Was Chester going somewhere? Not just running away in fear, but on a mission. The thought was ludicrous, yet it anchored her. He was out there, terrified, heading towards danger. The tracks were treacherous, especially in a storm. Loose gravel, hidden ditches, and the occasional freight train that still rumbled through, rarely but unpredictably. And a little one, a child, a kitten. Fear for Chester twisted into a sharper, more urgent dread. Grabbing her raincoat and a heavy-duty flashlight, Sarah burst out of the shelter's main door into the downpour. The wind snatched her breath away, whipping rain horizontally into her face. She pulled her hood up, but it was futile. Within seconds, she was soaked. "Chester!" Her voice was swallowed by the howling wind and the drumming rain. She shone the powerful beam around the parking lot, the beam cutting through the gray deluge. Muddy paw prints? Impossible to see in the churned gravel and flowing water. Which way? Towards the woods? Towards the tracks? It was the only clue. She had, however, insane its origin. The path to the old railway line was a half-mile through dense, dripping woodland, usually peaceful, now transformed into a tunnel of roaring wind and thrashing branches. Every shadow seemed to leap at her flashlight beam. Twice she slipped on slick leaves, mud coating her jeans. "Chester," she yelled again, the name ripped from her throat. "Chester, where are you?" Only the storm answered. Despair began to seep in, cold as the rain soaking through her clothes. How could an old storm-phobic cat survive this? How could he even navigate it? Had the note been a cruel joke? A final, bewildering act before succumbing to some hidden stress? The image of his sad, patient eyes flashed before her, warring with the impossible image on the security footage. She pressed on, driven by a desperate need to know. Breaking through the tree line onto the raised gravel embankment of the old railway felt like stepping onto a different planet. The wind roared unimpeded here, tearing at her coat. The twin steel rails gleamed wetly under her flashlight, stretching into a vanishing point swallowed by rain and mist. To her left, the tracks curved sharply around a bend, hugging a steep, rocky outcrop. To her right, they disappeared into a dark, dripping tunnel carved through the hillside. Sarah swept her light along the embankment. Nothing. Just gravel, weeds, bent double by the wind, and the relentless rain. The little one by the tracks. Where? Panic flared. This stretch was long. She turned left, stumbling along the uneven gravel beside the tracks, her beam dancing wildly. "Hello!" she screamed into the storm. "Is anyone there? Chester!" Thunder cracked directly overhead, shaking the ground. Sarah flinched, nearly dropping the flashlight, and in that split second of blinding terror, she saw it. Further, down the embankment near the base of the rocky outcrop where the curve began, a flash of movement. Not human, low to the ground. Orange, ginger, Chester. Sarah scrambled down the steep, muddy slope, sliding more than running, grabbing at slick weeds for balance. Her heart hammered, a frantic drum against her ribs. He was alive. He was here. But why? As she neared the spot, her light caught him. Again. He wasn't running. He was crouched low, fur plastered dark against his body, but his head was turned, not towards her, but intently towards a dark crevice where the large rocks met the embankment. He looked focused, not terrified, but alert. Guarding? Sarah reached the bottom, mud sucking at her boots. "Chester? Buddy? It's me, Sarah." She took a cautious step towards him, her light now illuminating the crevice he watched. It was deeper than it looked from above, a narrow gap shrouded in shadow. "What is it, boy? What are you looking at?" Chester didn't move towards her. He let out a low, rumbling sound, not a growl, but a deep, resonant murmur, almost like a hum. Then, from the depths of the crevice, so faint it was almost lost in the storm's roar, came another sound. A tiny, trembling, utterly terrified whimper, not a cat, a child. Sarah's blood turned to ice. She lunged forward, thrusting the flashlight beam deep into the crevice. Huddled in the very back, shivering violently, soaked to the skin, was a small boy. He couldn't have been more than 5 or 6. His eyes, wide with primal fear, reflected the light like a trapped animal's. He wore only thin pajamas, coated in mud. "Oh my God," Sarah breathed, dropping to her knees at the entrance, heedless of the mud. Hey, sweetheart. It's okay. I'm here. You're safe now." Her voice cracked with emotion. The boy just whimpered again, pressing further back into the rock. How long had he been here? Where did he come from? Chester, still crouched nearby, let out another soft, humming murmur. He shifted slightly, turning his massive head to look directly at Sarah. In the beam of her flashlight, his eyes gleamed with an uncanny, ancient knowing. Rain streamed down his face like tears, but he held her gaze steadily. It wasn't the look of a lost, frightened animal. It was the look of someone who had completed a task. The note. "The little one by the tracks is afraid." He hadn't just written it. He had known. He had come here. A fresh wave of thunder, closer and more violent than before, shook the ground. Sarah instinctively ducked. The boy in the crevice screamed, a raw, piercing sound of terror. And then cutting through the fading rumble came another sound. A low, vibrating drone, felt more than heard, rising rapidly beneath the storms. Cacophony. A sound Sarah recognized with dawning horror. It was the deep, mournful whistle of a freight train, and it was coming from the direction of the dark tunnel around the bend, heading straight towards them, where they huddled exposed, on the curve of the track, mere feet from the rails. There was no time. The train was rounding the bend now, its massive headlights slicing through the rain and mist like a vengeful eye, illuminating the terrified boy, the kneeling woman, and the sodden, watchful cat with brutal, blinding clarity. The train's horn wasn't a sound. It was a physical force, a shrieking beast tearing through the storm's roar, vibrating in Sarah's bones, shaking the wet gravel beneath her knees. Time didn't slow. It fractured. The blinding headlight pinned them. The terrified child curled into a ball deep in the crevice, Sarah frozen halfway in, her raincoat a dark smudge against the rocks, and Chester, a sodden ginger sentinel, plastered to the ground mere feet from the gleaming, rain-slicked rail. The monstrous engine rounded the bend, a wall of screaming metal and light hurtling towards them. There was no path up the steep, muddy embankment fast enough. No diving deeper into the crevice. The boy was already at the back. Sarah's mind screamed, "Move!" But her body was lead, locked in primal terror. Then orange fur blurred, not away, but forward. Chester launched himself, not at Sarah, not at the boy, but across the narrow strip of gravel separating the crevice entrance from the rail. He landed in a skid directly on the track bed, facing the oncoming juggernaut. His body, usually heavy and slow, was coiled wire, every muscle straining. He planted himself, a small, defiant silhouette against the apocalyptic glare. His missing ear was starkly visible, his fur streaming water. He threw his head back, and instead of a yowl of fear, a sound ripped from his throat that Sarah had never heard, a deep, guttural, almost unearthly challenge, a roar that momentarily pierced the mechanical scream of the train. It was pure, suicidal instinct, a distraction, a sacrifice. "No! Chester!" Sarah's paralysis shattered. The cat's impossible courage ignited her own. She didn't think. She lunged. Not for Chester. There was no time. He was too far. But into the crevice, throwing her entire body over the whimpering child, pressing him deep into the rock wall, shielding him with her own back. She squeezed her eyes shut, bracing for the impact, the tearing metal, the end. The light seared through her eyelids. The noise was deafening, a physical pressure threatening to burst her eardrums. The ground shook violently. She felt the rush of displaced air, thick with the smell of oil and hot metal, like a dragon's breath. Gravel peppered her legs. Something heavy and wet, mud, a rock, slammed into her shoulder, and then the sound began to change. The shriek of the horn faded slightly, replaced by the rhythmic, earth-shaking clack, clack, clack of wheels on rails. The blinding light swept past, replaced by a dizzying blur of dark, rushing boxcars. The train wasn't stopping. It hadn't seen them. It was passing. Sarah dared to open her eyes. Inches from her face, the world was a roaring gray-black wall of speeding metal. But they were alive. Huddled in the lee of the rocks, shielded by the narrow crevice's lip, the train's bulk missed them by sheer, terrifying centimeters. The wind whipped violently around them, sucking at her coat. She tightened her grip on the shivering child beneath her, feeling his frantic heartbeat against her chest. How long? The train seemed endless. A rattling, roaring river of steel carving. The storm. Her gaze, frantic, searched the gravel where Chester had stood. He was gone. Vanished. Had the train... A sob choked her. Then, movement. A low, pained mule. Her flashlight, miraculously still clutched in her hand though its beam was weak and flickering, swept erratically. There, tucked even tighter against the base of the rocks, behind where Sarah and the boy now huddled, further protected from the train's slipstream, was Chester. He was pressed flat, trembling violently, eyes wide with the aftermath of terror, but alive. He'd somehow scrambled back at the last possible second, finding a pocket of safety just as Sarah shielded the boy. Their eyes met. His were no longer ancient and knowing, but wide, vulnerable, the eyes of a very old, very scared cat who had just faced hell. A wave of profound, dizzying relief washed over Sarah, mingled with awe. He'd done it. He'd saved them. The final boxcar rattled past, its red taillight vanishing into the rain and mist like a dying ember. Sudden, shocking silence descended, broken only by the drumming rain, the howling wind, and the boy's ragged, terrified sobs. Sarah slowly, stiffly pushed herself up. Every muscle screamed. She turned, gently pulling the child with her. Clung to her, burying his face in her soaked coat, his small body racked with shivers. "Shh, sweetheart. It's over," she murmured, her voice raw. "You're safe. We're safe." Her eyes scanned the small, muddy space. Chester hadn't moved. He lay where he was, breathing heavily, watching them. Sarah reached out a trembling hand, slowly, slowly. She didn't want to startle him after such trauma. Her fingers brushed the wet fur between his ears. He flinched, then, incredibly, leaned into the touch. A low, shaky purr rumbled in his chest, weak but unmistakable. It was the first time he'd ever purred for her. The sound, fragile and brave in the aftermath of chaos, was a lifeline. Bonding moment. 1. Shared survival. The first purr, the touch, that bridges the impossible. "We need to get out of here," Sarah whispered, more to herself. She scooped the unresisting child into her arms. He was light, too light. She looked at Chester. "Come on, brave boy. Let's go home." He looked exhausted, but at the word home, his ears twitched. He struggled to his feet, his limp, pronounced, and took a shaky step towards her. Sarah shifted the boy to one hip. He clung like a koala, and carefully gathered the big, wet cat into her other arm. He didn't struggle. He tucked his head against her chest, his purr gaining a fraction more strength, vibrating against her and the boy. The child peeked out from Sarah's shoulder, his huge, frightened eyes fixed on the cat. Chester blinked, slowly at him. Bonding moment 2. The shared burden, the warmth against cold fear, the slow blink of feline reassurance to a traumatized child. The walk back was a nightmare. The storm raged unabated. Sarah, burdened with both precious lives, slipped and stumbled through the mud and thrashing undergrowth, her flashlight beam growing ever dimmer. Every shadow felt menacing. Every creak of a branch sounded like the train returning. The boy shivered uncontrollably. Chester grew heavier, his purr fading to silence, his body limp with exhaustion. Fear for them both gnawed at Sarah. Hypothermia was a real danger. Had she made the right choice? Could she get them back in time? Finally, the shelter's parking lot lights emerged through the sheets of rain like a beacon. Sarah staggered the last few yards, bursting through the door into the blessed dry warmth. Maria, the overnight volunteer, jumped up from the desk, her face draining of color. "Sarah, what in the world?" Her eyes widened at the sight of the muddy, trembling woman holding a soaked, pajama-clad child and a bedraggled, barely conscious ginger cat. "Call 911. "Now!" Sarah gasped, gently lowering the boy onto a clean towel. Maria rushed over. Found him, by the tracks. Hypothermia, Chester. She laid Chester beside the boy on another towel. her hands trembling as she checked him. He was breathing, but shallowly, his eyes closed. The boy whimpered, reaching out a small, cold hand towards the cat. His fingers brushed Chester's wet fur. Chester didn't open his eyes, but a faint, almost imperceptible rumble started in his chest again. Bonding moment 3. The silent connection in safety, the child's touch seeking comfort from the cat who found him, the faint purr answering. The next hours were a blur of sirens, flashing lights, paramedics, and police. The boy, identified as Leo Henderson, had wandered away from his home several blocks away during the night, drawn outside by the storm's noise, and gotten hopelessly lost. His frantic parents arrived at the shelter as the ambulance prepared to take Leo and Sarah, for minor scrapes and exposure, to the hospital. Their tearful reunion, the mother clutching Leo who still wouldn't let go of the paramedic's blanket, but kept looking back towards the shelter door, was heart-wrenching. Sarah, wrapped in a thermal blanket, pointed weakly towards the treatment room. The cat? Chester? He found him. He saved us. At the hospital, checked and cleared, Sarah couldn't rest. She had to know about Chester. She called Maria. The news was guarded but hopeful. Exhausted, dehydrated, and chilled to the bone but stable. The shelter vet was keeping him overnight on fluids and warmth. He's a tough old soul, Sarah, Maria said, her voice thick with emotion. A miracle cat. The story exploded. Mystery cat saves lost boy from freight train. News vans crowded the shelter parking lot the next day. Reporters clamored for interviews. Sarah deflected most, her focus solely on Chester, recovering in a quiet quarantine room. Leo's parents, overwhelmed with gratitude, visited. Leo himself, shy but determined, knelt by Chester's cage, holding out a new plush blue mouse toy through the bars. For the hero cat, his father whispered. Chester, still weak but alert, regarded the boy. Slowly, deliberately, he stretched out a paw and gently tapped the toy. Then he looked up at Leo and blinked, slowly, deliberately. Leo smiled, a tiny radiant thing. The moment was captured by a discreet shelter volunteer, a photograph that would later go viral. The lost boy, safe, offering thanks to the cat who braved a storm and a train to find him. The adoption papers were signed a week later, not by a new family, but by Sarah. The shelter director, Mr. Evans, handed them over with a misty smile. Never had a case like this, Sarah. Never. He hesitated, then slid a small yellowed envelope across the desk. Found this buried deep in Chester's original intake file from years back. Came in as a stray found near those same railway tracks, actually. This was tucked in the carrier. Sarah opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, brittle with age. The handwriting, though shakier, was unmistakably similar to the note left in Chester's cage. It read, "His name is Chester. He sees the lost ones. Be kind to him. A friend." Sarah stared, goosebumps rising on her arms. The mystery deepened, weaving threads of kindness across years. Chester hadn't just been brought near the tracks. He'd been left there long ago with a message. He was a guardian, passed from one unseen hand to another, until he found his way to Sarah, and then to Leo. That evening, Sarah carried Chester's bed into her small living room, placing it near the fireplace. She set the new blue mouse beside it. Chester, clean and dry, his fur fluffed, padded in. He paused, surveying his new domain. No bars, no echoes of other animals, just warmth, quiet, and Sarah watching him with tear-filled eyes full of love and wonder. He walked slowly to the bed, circled once, and settled down with a deep, contented sigh. Then he looked up at her, his eyes holding that ancient knowing gaze once more. But now beneath it was a profound peace, a belonging. He blinked slowly. Sarah knelt beside him, resting her hand gently on his head. His purr began, deep and resonant, filling the quiet room, a steady rumble of contentment, of a journey ended, of a purpose fulfilled, of home finally found. The storm outside had passed, leaving the world washed clean. Inside, the fire crackled, casting dancing shadows. The worn blue mouse sat beside the new plush one. And an old cat, once unwanted, slept deeply, safe at last. His purr a soft, healing melody in the heart of the home he had saved, and that had finally saved him. The world forgets old strays, but sometimes they remember how to save us.